All right, so thanks for coming back. This session I'm going to be talking about social media and tracking your results to know, well, is this worth it? Is this effort I'm putting in worth it, and is it being effective? But since we have a smaller group, I wanted to kind of tap into the group and find out, is there something that you're struggling with now, or that you have questions about social media or about tracking your results? What brings you here today? Why are you here? Is there anything you're hoping I'll talk about, or that, like I said, you're struggling with, or what brings you here? What question might you have? Yes.
I was fascinated in your last speech where you talked about not only tracking who you're sending the email to or the different information, but what their interests were, what the email was about, type things, some keywords that you could tap into to be able to track those.
Excellent. Okay, so tracking people's interests, and yeah, because I think it can be challenging. I mean, I work with a lot of human service agencies who sometimes have 20 or 30 programs, and so that's a lot more difficult for them. I think one advantage you as a parent centers have is that you have a little bit more defined audiences. And I don't know, so for example, right now, do you have a box in your database that says whether this person is an educator or a parent or something?
We have all of those.
Oh, good.
But where I find the problems is we have certain check boxes for different criteria or categories that we talk about.
Okay.
But so many times I'm into another subject that I cannot figure out which box
it goes under.
It would go under, and I'd really like to track that thought a little better.
Okay, and are you easily able to modify your database so you could add a field like that, or is that harder?
Probably, I don't know. Now I look at my box.
Okay. And say, can we change the database? And, okay, great. Because oftentimes it's really good to kind of track that back to, great, where is that point of pain and how can it be helped? So, good. So great, tracking interests. Do other people have something that they're hoping to do with social media or thinking about or worried about or wanting to know about? Yes.
I do.
Thanks, Kathy.
It seems like a lot of people in our state are mostly using Facebook to catch up with family and friends.
Right.
Kind of get on, read the posts, only occasionally write one lyric and get off.
Right.
So within that context, how can we use stories or other kinds of strategies to make our using Facebook worth the time invested it will take us if you're up to it?
Great. And so she was talking about, most people like go onto Facebook, catch up with family and friends, just kind of lurk and listen and might post something. And that's very true. There's something like out of 100 people that will follow you, 90% will lurk and listen, 9% will respond to a conversation, but only 1% will initiate a conversation. So that it really does lie on you to initiate conversations, to make a controversial statement or to ask a provocative question, because that's how you get conversation started. And also not to have it be too high a bar. One of my clients who doesn't even work with food, one of the most engaged conversations they had on Facebook was saying to people, "What are you having for dinner on Sunday night?" I mean, you're working with parents and children and families. That's a question that almost everyone can answer. So that's what got the most response. And so understanding that, and I'll talk about this, that social media really is an engagement tool. It's much more for me to, as I go on and I'm catching up with friends and family, for me to catch up with you as well, for me to catch up with that Pathfinder, to catch up with the Parent Center. And so that it's short and sweet tidbits, not here is, the text of the grant we just submitted. Not that you would do that, but so to understand and to be like, okay, well, what is our voice and what are we going to talk about? And can I empower multiple people in my Parent Center to be our voice on Facebook? So it's not this, kind of standard kind of, I'm not looking for a word, but it's multidimensional and reflects real people. Like, here is a person who's working with a parent and they just posted something about, I was in this meeting with this, this parent and this teacher, and this parent asked this great question. What do you think? So asking people their opinions, what they think, asking them for input on things. So great, that's a great one. We'll talk about that. So anybody else come with a question or something that they're hoping that I'll talk about? And yes?
Actually, we're getting ready to add Facebook and Twitter.
Great, Sherry.
One thing that concerns me is how are we
Great. How are you going to handle negativity? Great. So, and I want to give you what I hope is an inspiring example, which you may have heard of because it was pretty public. The American Red Cross, not a young, nimble organization, but they do an amazing job on social media. They're a great place to follow, by the way, if you want a good example of social media. They had hired, they had a new person who went into the role of the person who was going to update Twitter and Facebook for them. And they use a tool called Hootsuite, which I'll talk about later, but Hootsuite, H-O-O-T Suite, Hootsuite allows you to update multiple accounts from a single place. You open it up and you're like, oh, okay, now I'm going to update my personal, now I'm going to update the parent center place. This person had just started using this tool. She went on to update the American Red Cross Twitter stream and wrote, oh, we just found 5 more beers and we're going to get chiseled. And so out across under the American Red Cross logo came this tweet. And so, of course, the communications manager got a call at 2 in the morning about, why is the Red Cross getting chiseled? So they handled it beautifully. They said, the next post came up and said, we have removed the offending tweet. Rest assured, we have taken the keys away and that our organization is very sober. And they came out and said, Wendy Harmon, by the way, if you want to follow someone who's great with social media, Wendy Harmon of the American Red Cross. And Wendy said, we deal with natural disasters. This was a human mistake. This was one little thing. It wasn't, a disaster. So first of all, I get that there's going to be negativity. And so on one hand, understand that it's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's going to be gone in 48 hours. It's not this lasting impact. It's not carved in stone on the side of your building. So on one hand, to be like, stuff happens. On the other hand, people often ask that question about blogs. Oh, if I have a blog, people are going to put all these negative comments up about me. I mean, whether maybe about, abortion or religion or things like that. It's like, what? If you don't have that conversation in your playpen, they're going to have it somewhere else. And then you're not even in the room and you can't even respond. And who has a great response chart? I don't have it in this presentation, but I recommend you look it up. It's on Flickr. The Air Force online response chart. And basically it says, okay, is this comment positive or negative? If it's positive, do we want to say, yeah, thanks, and elaborate on it or not? If it's negative, then what category does it fall under? Is it just someone being like, I hate this organization, they're awful, and it's just, there's no real content? Or is it like, I found the way that you conducted that parent training didn't meet my needs as a learner? Then that's an awesome opportunity for you to be like, oh, great, we're trying to incorporate more visual learning techniques or whatever you might be doing. So, because a lot of organizations I've found have this challenge where it's like, I must appear very professional and perfect. Mm-hmm. And guess what? All the time, right, 24/7. None of us are perfect, none of our organizations are perfect. Yeah, but I'm surprised. Yeah, nobody outside expects that. So for you to be able to say, oh, we're right. We've heard from several parents this particular thing, and this is what we're thinking about changing about that training. What do you think? So it's a great opportunity to engage other people and to be really open and honest about, that is a weakness and we know about it, rather than trying to shove it under the carpet or things like that. So if you have later though, if you have something specific negative though that you think of and you'd like to kind of role play or something like that, or maybe tap into the wisdom of the group, that would be a great idea to see how would other people handle it, because I'm sure it'll come up for people. But to kind of temper fear with experience, put it out there and see what happens. I mean, I'm going to be talking about having a conversation on social media, and so often nonprofits are like, oh my God, I don't have all this time to have all this conversation, and it's like, I would love it if 100 people comment on what you put on Facebook, but until that happens, you don't really have that problem. When you have that problem, let me know, and I'm happy to help you with it. But okay, great. So I want to talk about social media. I want to talk about this book I mentioned, The Network Nonprofit, and concepts from it. And then I'm going to talk about metrics and have Q&A. This is going to be shorter than the other one because I want to have more interaction with this. So I think I already drilled into your head from the last session that email and the website is still number one. You've got to have a good website, and you've got to track the website, the email, and the social media metrics. And I'll show you where you can look and find out what's working for me on social media. But oftentimes it's the website. You have to be on top of, it's called referring sites, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but what are the sites that are referring traffic to my website? I had a small organization, it's the Palm Center out of UC Santa Barbara. They worked on the Gays in the Military issue. Small organization, 4 people all over the country. They spent 6 months working hard on Facebook and trying to be engaging in things. Facebook is now the #1 driver of traffic to their website. But they would not have known that effort paid off unless they had been following their website metrics. So there is that connection between seeing what's working on social media and what's happening on your website. So just a couple basics. As I kind of mentioned, that social media is a conversation. It's totally not blasting your message. Yvette was talking about how she felt like, when she looked at her website, it was kind of blasting their message or kind of static and just them talking at you. And that's the thing with social media. If you go on social media and you're like, this is when our training is, donate to us, like that, that's blasting your message and you'll look like you don't know what you're doing. So before you go into social media, like Sherry, if you're just thinking of starting with Facebook and Twitter, I strongly recommend you spend the next 4 months listening to people and seeing what do they do that's effective and what do they put on there that I would respond to and that I don't care about. Because there's a rule, and I don't think I have it in here, so I'll share my tip with you, which is 70% of your posts on social media should be information, tips, something useful for the audience. Okay, 70% of your updates on social media should be something that I would pass on or that are useful to me. Only 30% should be donate, come to our event, here's the thing about our training. Okay? Because I'm not going to pass that on if it's just kind of that blasting your message. And you want me to pass it on because that's how things, I don't like the term go viral because it sounds like an illness, but I like word of mouth, so that's how people pass those on. Yeah, yes?
I kind of had a question for the group. Does everybody have a donate link?
You mean a donate now, an online, does anyone not have a donation button on their webpage? One, okay. Okay, and while we're at it, thanks, this is not a bad idea. How many people have a page on Facebook that they update? Almost all of you. Okay, how many people have a Twitter presence that you update on some regular basis? Okay, maybe about 40%. Great. Good, because some of the best examples when I talk about you listening are the people in this room. Follow your other parent centers, because there's ones across the country, some who do good jobs, some who doesn't a bad job. A lot of people are learning about this stuff and trying new things and seeing what works. And so again, you're going to come across this example and be like, oh, that's a great tip. That those are the kinds of things and resources I should be passing on and doing in my Facebook and Twitter things, not just I'm so great. Or, once in a while when you hire a new person, that's great, but to just talk about your staff or something like that, that wouldn't really be effective in the long term. It's good to put a face on it, but yeah, Julie.
I think, John, to your point too, that I think it's important for us to think about, I think we've kind of been through this, is to also make sure that you are doing 30% of what you are doing, though. I think sometimes you think of Facebook as only an opportunity, if I only have something that someone else is doing to share, and I think sometimes you can move that to the other way, and there's 5% of the work that Peak's doing. So I think you have to,
Excellent.
That balance is really important, but I think we have to look at the 30% and the 70% and put them in perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why in that other session I was advocating so much for you getting a handle on and getting in the habit of posting content about what did you do yesterday. It's so interesting. What did you do last week? How did you help a parent last week? How did you help an educator? How did you have a successful IEP last week? Because that's, and by successful, I don't mean like, there was fireworks. I mean, that it worked, like you left with an agreement or you worked through a difficult issue. That is great content. And those are the kinds of things that also work well on social media. So excellent point, because I think you're right, that can get warped. So it's a conversation up, blasting your message, and it's important to think about that second action. People then visiting your website, being a volunteer, because there's a connection between that online and offline. It used to be, and kind of it still is, it's really easy for me to like things. Yeah, I like your parent center. Yeah, I don't like people clubbing baby seals. That's not really an action. I'm not really doing anything. I'm clicking my mouse. They talk about slacktivism, where, I'm not really doing anything. I'm just passing it on. But I'll talk about this in a minute about, people who have big networks and have a big platform can really pass on your message and it can get to the right people. And so that can be really helpful, right? So first, let's start with some data. N10, along with some partners, does this great social media benchmark report. And from 2011, Facebook was at the top, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn are steady. And just so you see, these are the percentages of the organizations who are on here. And that tracks kind of what we had in the room, about 90% on Facebook, maybe 60% on Twitter. I didn't ask about you all about YouTube, but about half. And for those organizations that staff it, it's usually between a quarter and a half FTE as kind of the norm for staffing. And like you all, most of these organizations, this person has 4 or 5 jobs, including maybe the e-newsletter and email. But if you are able to empower a variety of staff to do this, that's great. But also to understand how things translate. Like I said, email is still number 1. So one of the figures that came out of this I liked was for every 1,000 email subscribers, nonprofits have 110 Facebook users and 19 Twitter followers. So that email is still important, and it's still really important because once you have this larger email base, then you're able to ask people to like you on Facebook and follow you on Twitter. And as we talked about in the other session, you all have a unique set of stakeholders. If you were able to survey all your parents and ask them how many are on Twitter, you might find out that only 20% are. You might be surprised and find out that 80% of them are. I don't know your population, but you might be really surprised. Never assume that you know. I mean, somebody made that comment about older people, and while I get that, that's also a big prejudice that is false. The largest growing group of people on social media are women in their, older adults, over 65. For a lot of them, it's because their grandchildren are on there and they don't respond to email because email's for old folks, and I don't know how I do it, business without email, but I know that that's how it goes. But great. So just as an example, and that's a good report if you'd like to look at it. One of the best books that come out about social media in the past, and as long as people have been writing about social media for nonprofits, I think is this book. It's The Networked Nonprofit by Beth Cantor and Allison Fine. And just so you know, they wrote, according to them, they wrote it, the intended audience was Tessie Trepidatious. And Tessie Trepidatious has been working in nonprofits for 30 years. She doesn't really get social media. That's who they wrote this book for. So if that's you, or you're some part of that, don't think that, oh, this is some technical book that people like John, just breeze through or anything. So no, I think it's really well written. They talk about a couple concepts I wanted to share with you. The first one is supporting free agent activists. When I said to Sherry, I want you to listen for the next 4 months, I encourage you all to be constantly listening. And that means to make sure you have things like Google Alerts, which will email you every time your organization is mentioned. If you don't have a Google Alert, go to alerts.google.com. For example, I have one for John Kenyon, but you have to put it in quotes, like you would put Peak Parent Center in quotes. If I just put John Kenyon, it would give me every mention of John on the internet, which would be a little overwhelming. So you put that in quotes, and every time somebody mentions you on the internet, it's going to send you an email whenever Google finds it. It's been very helpful. Somebody posted an article and attributed it to me that was written horribly, by the way, and it wasn't my article, so I'm like, that's not my article, and I wrote them immediately, and they took it down. That could have hurt my reputation over months if it just sat there without my knowing about it, okay? And just to your point about negativity, if somebody's talking about you someplace else, you want to know about it so you can go and respond. You can be like, according to our records, you've never actually been to one of our parent trainings, so I'm not sure where this is coming from. You may not even want to respond. You may just want to say, according to our records, you've never been to our training. And that could just end it right there because it cuts out their credibility. But anyway, so there's these free agent activists out there, and it's really important for you to support them because they're giving you free marketing and free advertising. I was working with this organization, and somebody went, and this happens frequently for schools, for example, with reunions. People put up Facebook pages for them, and the organization of the school didn't put it up. And they were like, well, what should our response be? We think we should sue them. It's like, so they're going to their friends and saying they think you're great and you want to sue them? It doesn't make sense. So supporting these people by giving them tools and talking to them about, these are the kinds of things we'd like to talk about, and providing content. So to Julie's point, making sure you're giving them content about your organization that's interesting to share, and that you're doing that. To embrace this culture of openness and connectivity that I was talking about before, about being able to say, these are the things I do to help prepare a parent for their first IEP. What do you think, seasoned parents who have been to, 10 IEPs. What do you think? What could we change about that? That's a very different mentality than most organizations, I would think, have right now, where it's like, we talk about within this parent center and within our parent center network how we support a parent that's going into an IEP. We're not really opening up to the public and saying, oh, this is what we think, what do you all think? And understandably, 100% of the feedback you get is not going to be useful or high quality. But the fact that you just asked me really raises my esteem of your organization 100-fold, because you don't think you're perfect and you're asking me my opinion, and people like to be asked that. And once in a while you get a really great idea from somebody who might be in Hawaii, or somebody just outside of your network or outside of your world and outside of what we call the echo chamber, because that's one thing about social media and the internet and our worlds, is that we often end up with this echo chamber of people who think and feel like us and just reinforce our beliefs and don't challenge us or give us new ideas. So to embrace that openness and connectedness, and understand that that simplicity and openness really power social media. So simple updates, really things, like I said, short and to the point about this is what we did, or we're finding we find, and I don't know if you all could fill in the blank for me, but we find that bringing this up really helps, the parent and the teacher find that common ground that we know that they really have, even though it can often be an adversarial thing. Okay. So I talked before about a tool called Add This or Share This, and this is a free tool that can be added to your website, and it allows me to share or any piece of content on your website across social media. So here's for Duke University. They have this share button here. When I click on it, up comes everything, Blogger, Facebook, things like that, and I can share it. And understand, again, you're not just a United States organization that's open 9 to 5. You're online, so you're open 24 hours a day internationally. Things like Bebo are huge in South America. And guess what? I bet there's some parents of children with disabilities in South America who also have to, do these things. Maybe not in the same context and the same structure and laws, but that might be really interesting to them, and they might have some great ideas for you. And so your exposure could be great. And you also never know when a funder might be looking at this stuff and be changing their funding focus and thinking, oh wow, that sounds like an innovative new idea or a really good solid approach. All right. So, yes, Yvette, thank you.
So when you show the video slides, all those different platforms, I guess?
Yes.
So with me, I would want to know what it looked like.
Excellent. She says, I want to know what it looks like. Excellent. And what should happen, and so this is a great kind of operational point, when you add this tool to your website, you should test it. Just put it on a page that's maybe not public, and say to your board or some volunteers or even some parents, we just put this new tool up. Will you go and try sharing this, on Facebook or Twitter and see how it works? Because again, even if it doesn't work perfectly, it's just a tweet. It's not anything that important, and test and see how it works. For some of these tools, you can modify how it looks. Sometimes it's based on how your website is set up. And so, I don't want to get too technical, but there's something called a title tag, and every page of your website has a title tag. So if I'm on the donation page, it should say, the organization name, donations, or donation page. Some organizations, it's only the organization name up top, and it never changes as it should. And so when I click on the share button, it's going to share that title tag of that website page. So that may require you to go back and say, we need to have, if we're going to put our e-newsletters up, it should say, peak parent e-newsletters. And so when I share that, that's what it looks like. But oftentimes you can, and again, most people aren't going to use these 100. I think you only need to worry about Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Just test those two, and oftentimes it will let you choose what it says, so that it looks good. And then you'll just get into a rhythm of, okay, I'm going to start titling my posts a little differently because I know it grabs the title of the post and shares that. Okay. So that I don't put April newsletter, I put, something more interesting. Good question. So one of the things they talked about that I was just talking about is distributing work and sharing ideas. I mean, they talk about empowering all of your staff to be relationship builders, which means, especially if you have a small organization, everyone on staff is your Facebook administrator, and everyone can tweet through the organization. that may or may not, be a good fit right out of the gate, but to try and at least get to the point where someone who works with volunteers is posting to Facebook, someone who works with parents, someone who works with educators, and someone who works with donors are all have access, who also have policies and guidelines so they know what to talk about, and also are given feedback so that they're writing well for social media. So, hi Joyce, yes.
We have some general policies and guidelines regarding the use of social media. But one of the things that we've done is try to restrict staff from identifying themselves on their personal sites as employees of Raising Special Kids.
Okay.
Because they sometimes post pictures of themselves at parties.
Right.
Or drinking or engaging in, normal social behavior.
That's right.
But but we just felt that was not a good connection. So.
Great.
In Arizona?
So yeah, and you'll find and you'll know best what's the cultural fit for your organization. And so, people are still usually, like on Facebook, for example, they're going to say where they work. But I understand when I'm looking at their personal page that this isn't the organization at this party. But that would be different than posting a picture from the party as the admin of the organization on Facebook. In the Network Nonprofit, they argue that this line between your personal and your private is kind of a Victorian notion, and that we all work at nonprofits for personal reasons, and that. So for example, an example sometimes I use a site called TripAdvisor, which you may have heard of, and where people, rate, hotels and things like that. And I use it a lot because I travel a lot. And I have to take all those reviews with a grain of salt because, one person will say, I love this pool, I love this hotel, the kids love the pool. And the next person will say, I hate this hotel, the pool is full of kids. And so, it's the same experience, it's that different parts of an elephant thing. And I'm often usually actually with the second person, I love kids, but not over the pool. But so, I think there's something to that, and you want to test and try that. But for somebody to be able to speak passionately and say, this weekend, even though I work there, I volunteered for this place and did this on their personal page. So, again, I think it'd be worth, working with those guidelines. I think you have to start there where you're comfortable with. So I think, that if you're going to empower people to be able to speak in different voices on the page, I think that's a great step. And to be comfortable with that, you need to have this guideline about, your personal page is your personal page. And so, if you're going to talk about work stuff, go in as the admin and talk about work stuff in the work page. So that makes sense. Giving credit and thanking people when they talk about you. For example, I was doing a workshop in Santa Rosa, California, and it's a relatively small town, and the Santa Rosa Symphony was there. And they're like, no one ever tweets about us. So I went online on Twitter and I looked up Santa Rosa Symphony. Up came all these tweets from somebody called NG Major. All that NG Major tweets about is classical music in Northern California. So during your listening, you may find some people that are really passionate about the rights of children with disabilities, or the rights of parents, or the responsibilities of teachers, all those things that are tangential to your work. You may find them, they may have said great things about you, they may not, but you might be able to turn them around. The Red Cross is a great example. Even though they're large, they had this blogger go on and was like, I just took this training class at this Red Cross and it was terrible. Because they were listening, the local manager called that person within a week and was like, oh, I'd love to talk to you about that. The next blog post from that person was, I was just so impressed because they just called me and asked me about my experience and took my feedback, and now I'm much more likely to go back. Insert parent center training there, and that's a great advantage for you. Oh, sorry, I forgot to turn my phone off. That's a great advantage for you, so you're able to give credit and thank people when they pass on the word or talk about you, which is really important. And it takes that long to say thanks. When someone, if you're going to be on Facebook, you have got to be responding in a timely manner when somebody posts something. Because if somebody does post something on your wall and you don't respond to it, that's not going to encourage anyone else to post or other people to have conversations. I wouldn't usually even post on an organization's page unless I see that there had been previous conversations where people had responded, that the organization's even listening. Because otherwise, I feel stupid, like I'm talking to a brick wall, which in fact I am because nobody's listening. So, okay. And as I said, they really advocate that relationship building is a core responsibility for all staff, because you don't know who your staff may have network connections to. They may be potential amazing employees, potential amazing board members, potential amazing funders. And so to allow them to speak about what they do, both on the page and sometimes in their personal place, if you're comfortable with that, but that everybody who's on social media and who's willing to do it. Because I also ran into an organization that we went through all this work with their social media guidelines and policies and planning, and then they went to implement it, and they gave it to the youngest person in the organization, because that's what they thought, who'd never been on Facebook. And so this person, totally fell on their face and didn't know what they were doing, because they hadn't spent that time listening and getting used to how does this work. So it's important also to match it. Usually when I go into an organization, the first thing I do is, okay, let's go around the table and what do you do in your personal life on social media? Who is on Facebook? Who does what? And oftentimes it's not like the youngest, hippest person. They're often like, oh no, I don't do that, because they're too cool for it, in fact, or something like that. And so starting by finding out, where are people right now? What do you do in your personal lives? If you want to be on Facebook and Twitter, for your organization, you or somebody needs to be on it first. Just because your board member says we need to be on Twitter, it's like, well, if no one in the organization is on Twitter, we need to spend 6 months being on Twitter and understanding what that universe is like. Or else we're going to look like we don't know what we're doing, because we don't. Okay. And I talked about before about this, because I thought that was a great point that Sherry brought up about negative comments. One of your jobs is to catalyze and manage the conversation. Because like I said, my having worked with parent centers, I totally get this unfortunate and not always, but sometimes adversarial relationship that's put up, and I have friends that are teachers that I've talked to about this, between the teacher and the parent. It's like the parent is advocating for the child's rights. With the IEP, they're saying this is what my child needs, and the educator or the teacher is like, yes, I get that, and I'm already completely maxed out, and no one's going to give me any extra resources to do this. And so while we're trying to do inclusion, at the same time, only that one class gets some extra people to help do this extra stuff, and so that's why we end up funneling these kids into this class, which just screws up the inclusion. And so to be able to say to your social networks, what can we do to help balance this? Can we, as parents of children with disabilities, who I get are also maxed out often, is there some way we can provide more support to these teachers? Can we band with them to go to the school boards or the councils or even our community and say we need to increase taxes to give more resources to these people because we're asking them to do these things and we're not giving them any resources? I mean, I don't know, these are complicated issues, but to be able to just have that conversation with your communities about this, you might find that, oh gee, I didn't realize that the mayor was following us on Facebook and that he's actually behind this and supports raising taxes. I would have never thought to talk to him or call him or, something like that, but it just happens that someone in my network does. So you never know what might happen. And like I said, it doesn't always have to be that big. It can just be like, let's have a conversation about, have you used an iPad or a mobile device with your child? Something like that. Okay. Let's see. There's influencers like that guy in G Major. There's people out there who are talking about these issues. So identifying them and reaching and cultivating them. You may find somebody that has 10,000 followers on Twitter, and while you still only have 200, that could be a great person if they happen to mention you to drive a lot of traffic, just like a blogger would or another website that's very popular. So again, appreciating them, thanking them, and celebrating them generously and publicly for thank you all. I mean, Barb mentioned N10, and you may have heard of the nonprofit technology network, and they have a conference every year. And every year they do this scholarship fundraising thing. And they asked people this year to donate auction items, like I donated a couple hours of consulting and things like that. Last week, just before I left, I got 3 handwritten cards from the folks that had gotten scholarships saying thank you so much for donating and giving this scholarship, and I just really appreciated it. And that was just really wonderful. And so that was a way they found to thank and celebrate the folks that supported them. So, and again, when somebody says something nice about you on Facebook or on Twitter or on social media or on your website, it takes that long to say, thanks, we appreciate it. I'm not talking about a big administrative burden, especially if it's spread out and it's in your guidelines, like she was saying, that, saying thanks to somebody, that's great. Go ahead and do that. And I already mentioned that 1, 10, and 100, which is really just the inverse of 99 and 1 rule. For every 90 people, I think I said, that lurk and listen, 9 will respond to a post and only 1 will post. So that's why it's great if you or volunteers or multiple members of your staff, when you hit an interesting problem or something interesting happens, do a post about it. Again, it's a Facebook post. It's not being carved in stone. You're not sending out a letter to all your donors with this on it. It's just a Facebook post and say, this nice thing happened, or here's a picture of the training that we gave last week. That's great, especially when, like Julie said, you're trying to remember to, let's talk about ourselves and do that 30%. Yeah, JC.
About Facebook that I've learned from my own personal use with it is that it moves quickly.
Yeah.
So you put something up and then it's gone. And people don't go back to it. It's kind of like you have that window and then it's over. So I think that works the opposite way too. If you post something and you're kind of like, ew, why did we post that? But then it's gone an hour later or whatever.
Sure. And so what I know some organizations do, and this can be a good practice, and for some it's in their policies and guidelines, is about having this revolving content where we make sure that every week we're going to mention X. And if we're going to post 3 or 4 times a week, great. Like you said, people need to hear things 4 or 5 times. We're changing the location of our trainings, or we're moved, or something like that. They need to hear it multiple times. So I think that's right on, and it's good to realize that and be like, it can be okay to repost stuff. Everything doesn't have to be a new post, especially if it's important, or if every month we update, or every 2 weeks we update our training schedule for our parent trainings. Great. That's a great Facebook post or tweet that, like you said, could get buried. So, good. So Beth and Allison also created this great graphic that I like about ripples of social change, and they talk about this real-time learning loop, because what they advocate for, and what I think is a really good idea, is small experiments. Let's take one of our programs or one of our trainings, and let's try and promote it and talk about it and discuss it, either on Facebook or Twitter, and see what happens. Let's create and then have a real-time learning loop where we're doing our listening. What are people talking about their parent trainings? Let's listen to other parent centers. And then let's build up our social network, and let's do relationship building with the parents by giving them, tips and interesting stuff that's useful to them, which builds up our social capital. So when we ask them to come to the school board meeting and advocate for increased taxes or more resources for parents to help, for teachers to help actually implement the IEPs, great that we can have this social change in the real world. But that it's by metrics and measurement, okay, we tried to have this conversation about one of our trainings or one of our issues. How many people responded? How many people liked it? How many people commented on it? And then reflect on, okay, well, did we hit the mark, or did it miss it somehow, or did nobody respond? We think this is an important thing. Why did nobody respond? Was it 12 pages? Was it 12 paragraphs of text and you only got to read the first sentence of it, which wasn't very engaging? Do we need to, think about how we're writing for the web or what? And then how can we adapt? So these little learning loops. Good. And then some of the principles that they talk in relation to those concepts, and this is just what I said before, which is listen first and engage second. And I don't think the listening should ever stop. It's not like, okay, we're going to listen for 4 months, then we can stop listening because then we're just going to be putting out content. But it's always listening first and engaging first as we try new things and we're talking about different trainings. Building up that staff time and expertise. Like I said, not giving responsibility to Facebook for somebody who doesn't do Facebook, and understanding that if you all want to be on Facebook and Twitter, even if that doesn't appeal to you personally, it's important for you to go on and see what are other organizations doing and how does it work. Just like JC was able to share from her personal experience, things disappear really quickly. It's important for you to kind of understand that. You're like, well, no, we posted that last month. Why didn't you know it was up there? It's like, well, because I only go on twice a week or something. So, and the right metrics, which I'm going to get into soon. So. And actually here is Wendy Harmon, and so here they are at the Red Cross, and these are the different things that they do when it comes to social media. They're building relationships by, letting people, answering questions that people have and things like that. If there's a customer service issue, I came to this training and I don't know what it is. You all know better than I. What are some of the issues or feedback you get from parent trainings? Is it, I didn't like the coffee, or, I don't know how to apply this approach approach, or it could be a variety of things. The training you gave me was good about strategy, but I don't know how to make it operational, or I know what I need to advocate for, but I don't know how to say it to the teacher, or you all would know better than I exactly what those types of things are, but how can you listen and respond? Or, this influencer complaining, somebody that a lot of people follow who talks about children with disabilities, or, those poor educators who don't have any resources. Well, great. Can you talk about, we sympathize with them, but there's also these, these laws that need to be met, and there's these needs of these children that have to be met. And we understand there's a tension, and we're advocating really, to support the parents in this. And again, this is just talking about that real-time learning loop, where you do kind of, like I said, micro-planning. You don't have to be like, okay, for every asset of the organization and every training and issue we touch, this is going to be how we're going to deal with it on social media. No, like I said, pick one program, pick one thing that you're either trying to grow interest in or spread awareness about, and try and do that. And then listen and say, did this catch on? Did people start talking about it? How can we measure it? Did it drive traffic to the pages on our website that talk about it? And then let's reflect on it and then reiterate it, see if we can't do it better. Or if it worked, great, let's just rinse and repeat. Okay. So how do you keep track of all of this? And again, there's lots of social media networks and tools and things like that. I don't advocate that you try and track all of them. I think you should stick with the top ones. I think it's the Pew Internet Center came out with like 70% of Americans go on Facebook at least like once a month or something. Something that I was really amazed at. So Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Maybe LinkedIn if you're trying to connect, like the social workers or other professionals or things like that. But I think those are it. So this is a tool called Seismic, and this is a tool that it's a piece of software that goes on your desktop, and it gives me one place to look at these things. And so here is my feed from Twitter of the people I follow on Twitter. Here is the feed from the people and organizations I follow on Facebook. Here are replies to questions that I've or notes that I've sent to people on Twitter. And I worked for a while for the AIDS Legal Referral Panel, so I put in the words AIDS Legal, and it was following on Twitter any mention of AIDS Legal. Okay, so again, this is great for your listening project to put, your organization name or, children with disabilities in quotes and say, who is talking about this stuff and what are they saying? So that I have one place, I don't have to go to 3 different places every time I want to check social media, I just open it up and do it once. And you almost always, when I do these, somebody raises the question about time suck. Especially with Twitter. Twitter's just an endless stream of conversation. It's like you could tap into what everybody in this whole city is saying, and it just never ends because people are constantly talking. One trick I learned from Beth Cantor, and I think is right, is she just sets a timer. I've got 10 minutes or 15 minutes for social media. I'm going to open up this tool. I'm going to look through it. And when I'm done, I'm done. Because there's no way, I don't need to keep up with everything. I just want to kind of dip my hand in. A few specks of gold are going to hang out, and I'm going to let the rest of the water flow by. Because I want to talk about a real transition that I know has been for me, and I think for a lot of my clients. When I was growing up, I had newspaper editors and TV editors and all those people to sift all that news that was happening into what I was told. So on one hand, it made me nice and lazy in a way, because it's like, I don't have to do any of my own editing because they're doing it all for me, and if I just turn on ABC News, then I've got all I need. At the same time, if I wanted to read the review of a restaurant in San Francisco, I had one white guy to tell me what he thought about that restaurant. It wasn't just like with TripAdvisor, I had the AAA guide to say, this is what is about this hotel, for example, rather than, now I'm overwhelmed with 100 reviews of this hotel and people saying conflicting things. To me, that is still higher quality information, but it requires more of me. I need to be more of an editor. And so, especially with Twitter, to me, it's not that hard to be the Twitter editor, because I'm like, it's only 140 characters, so I'm like, scan, useless, my cat found chewing gum, the dog scratched his paw, like, I don't care. And then it's like, new law about children with disabilities, I mean, half the stuff I'm talking to you about here, or ideas that I talked about in the previous session, is because I found them out through my colleagues and through social networks, that I found interesting resources or guides or things like that, and that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. I mean, I'm connected to people on social media and Twitter that I don't have their email address, I wouldn't feel comfortable phoning them because I've never really met them, things like that. I mean, people who are really, kind of big names, not only in social media and nonprofits, but in technology. And same with you. I mean, we can follow our local and national lawmakers on things like that and see what they're saying and talking about, where, we wouldn't normally call them up. But again, I don't feel like I don't have to catch everything that everyone says on Facebook or Twitter. That's not possible, and I don't need that. I'm going to go through, I'm going to find those specks of gold, I'm going to take them and just let the rest of the water run through. Okay. Two other tools that are just like Seismic that let you look at multiple social media channels. One is Twitterific, and it's not only for Twitter, but again, it lets you do searches and follow specific people or specific phrases and see what's trending. And the other one is Hootsuite. You can monitor mentions of your organization. You can schedule when tweets and Facebook updates are going to come out. You can also update multiple channels. Again, one thing that's a little wonky about this, or can be challenging, is there's this little button that you change on Hootsuite when it says change the account. That's why that tweet went out for the American Red Cross about getting shizzled, because the person was new to the tool and she forgot to check the little box that said, my personal account and not the Red Cross account. Okay. So, but it's important for most of these tools have free trials. So whoever's going to be doing the majority of the updating or listening, have them get free accounts for a couple of them, try them for a week or so, and then just decide which one works best for us. Because there's no one tool that I can tell you is best for you. You always should start with your needs. Do you really need to schedule tweets and Facebook things? Do you really have that volume of content yet? I don't think so. Like Hootsuite, I think used to be free and now it's paid only. So do you really need that when something like Seismic is free? Okay. There's also a website, if you'd prefer to do this online, called NetVibes. And again, I'm able to put all my social media stuff in one place. Here's my feed of updates on LinkedIn. Here's the photo feed from Flickr. I was working with immigrant organizations, so I have a Twitter search going for immigrants, and here's Facebook and Twitter. So again, I can just open up this one application, set my timer for 10 minutes, scan through. If there's something interesting I want to read, great, I can go and read it. I might want to save it for later because I won't have time right now. But and again, I mean, I've had to think about, what works for me during my day and my energy level. Like in the morning, I'd much rather be writing and things like that. So I never open my email box in the morning. That's the worst thing I can do because then I get bogged down in all this little stuff. I'd much rather write and do things that I have energy for. And so I open Word or PowerPoint and work on projects in the morning when my energy is higher. Then when it gets a little lower, then I can get bogged down in email and answering these little things. And then maybe, sometimes in the afternoon or usually like twice a day, I'll open this up for 10 or 15 minutes. When I have, maybe some flexible time where I can go and read the articles that people mention or look at resources or whatever it may be. Okay. Staff time and expertise. So, I'm sorry, was it Joyce? Joyce? Great. And what organization, what parent center are you with, Joyce?
Arizona.
Great. And might you be willing to share your social media guide or policies, or are they up on your website anywhere? Is it totally internally? Total internal? Oh, great. Okay. So I just put that out there if somebody wants to bug her about that, or if there's pieces of it you're willing to share. But if not, the Red Cross has put theirs up publicly, and I give you they made a Google site out of it. And so what's great is that there's the social media handbook for the Red Cross units, listening to the existing conversation, learning the culture of social media, participating in our national social media presence, and creating your social media strategy. So I think this is real helpful for anyone. I know most of you aren't kind of Red Cross size, but this was built for their local chapters, so they were thinking smaller. And it leads you through exactly kind of the things that I was talking about, and gives you, the complete handbook, and includes their policies and things like that, which is really useful. The San Diego Foundation, actually, I read one of theirs a little while ago. It was wonderful. It was this one page about don't be an idiot. Don't say anything you wouldn't want to say to your grandmother. It was perfect common sense guidelines. It didn't have to be like, this is the list of things we talk about and this is the list of things we don't. Because you want to find that balance between common sense and also doing feedback. If you're having somebody do this, they're going to fall down. That woman, went on and said that, the American Red Cross was going to get drunk. But you have to have a feedback loop. And once a month sit down with people and say, we really appreciate you helping us do these tweets. These are exactly the kinds of things we'd love you to be tweeting about. These two, we really don't want to get into arguments with people about things. And we also don't like to say anything negative about any person or organization. That's just our policy. And, that's just an example, but things like that. All right, so the right metrics. So let's talk about then online metrics. Let's talk about for the website and for email and for social media. All right. So I'm not going to read through all these. This is more of a reference for you to come back to and look for, how do I measure success? How do I measure success with email messaging? How my list is growing, how many people are opening it, how many people are clicking through. How am I measuring success about fundraising sources? When I send out emails about fundraising, how many people click through and actually give? So this is a place where, for example, if you're sending out a fundraising email, you're going to need to look at these and kind of tie together your analytics. Okay, I sent out these 3 fundraising emails, and in the first email that went out to 1,000 people, 500 people opened it, which is amazing. And then 200 people actually clicked to my donation page. So that trail kind of ends there, because that's how much your email program can tell you. Then you need to go into your website or your online donation program and see, okay, in that same time period, how many people actually made donations? Because I've had some people make some real false assumptions, because you may see that front end of the data. 500 people opened it, 50% open, that's an amazing rate. And then 200 people clicked to our donation page, unheard of, wonderful. Wow, that was a big success. Only later did we go and look at their donation page and be like, only 10 people actually donated. What? And then there was a lot of things wrong with their donation page. There was like, 2 pages of text before you even got to the forms, and they were asking for your mother's maiden name and your father's, fax number and all sorts of stuff that wasn't necessary. But you need to be able to look at those and see how many people did we drive to the donation page, and then how many people actually donated, so we can drill down and see what's working and what's not. So for your website metrics, Google Analytics, if you don't have Google Analytics, I strongly would recommend it to you. I think it's one of the best tools that's out there. I mean, DreamHost and other places have metrics. So if you don't have this right now, whoever hosts your website, go to them and say, I want my data for the last year. And these are the pieces of data that I want for the last year. And if they don't have it, well, it's time to get Google Analytics on one hand. But on the other hand, it's good for you to know they don't have it, because Google Analytics can't go back historically. You sign up for Google Analytics, it gives you this little piece of code, and whoever does your website just goes and puts it in a template. Hopefully you have a template. If you don't, then they just paste it on every page of your website. But usually you can put it in a template and it will propagate throughout the website. Then it's going to track all sorts of fascinating information. Where do people come from? I mean, it's an ocean of information. These are the only things I think you should really look at, especially in the beginning. Unique visitors. It used to be that they were called hits to your website. If anybody starts talking to you about hits to your website, tell them to hit the road, because they don't know what they're talking about. Because hits, that's so last millennium, like I said last time. Because I could sit here and visit your website 10,000 times, and that would be 10,000 hits. And it's still one person. So you're looking for unique visitors. You want to look for, what are the most popular pages? That's when I ask everybody to stand up. What are the most popular pages on your website? Usually it's about us and your programs and things like that, but those are your static pages. But what stories are resonating with people? Is it a story about a teacher? Is it a story about a kid? Is it a story about a parent? Is it a story about your staff? That's how you drill down and get to know, what are my supporters most interested in, or what stories are we really touching them with? And also, like I mentioned, the least popular pages. Like I said, that place that had the community calendar that no one ever looked at. It can be really interesting to see what pages don't people ever look at on our website. How much time do they spend on a site? And you may want to look at specific pages, but mostly on the site. What keywords are people putting into search engines like Google to find us? I talked in the last session about AdWords and Google Grants, that Google will grant you certain words. You can mine these keywords that they're using to say, these are the words I want for my Google grant. And you might be surprised. People might be putting in like words that you wouldn't have thought of, or they may be misspelling your name. And you wouldn't have thought to put it in there, but a lot of people are misspelling our name and finding us through that. Where does website traffic come to us? Like I said, those referring sites, that's what I was talking about earlier. I'm going to pick on the poor Sisters of Notre Dame again. I did a presentation for them and talked to them about how important it is to know where traffic is coming from to your website. And I showed them their listing on Wikipedia. And you're familiar with Wikipedia, the online encyclopedia. The description of their organization came from the Catholic Encyclopedia of 1911 and talked about their work with Negroes and retards. And they were horrified. They went and changed it. They ran out of the room and changed it immediately, as they should. But it's really important for you to know where is traffic coming from to my website, because they may have it all wrong and they may be misrepresenting you. Okay? And if you have document downloads, that's a good thing to track as well. And I'm happy to go on if we have a minute and actually look at Google Analytics, and I can walk you through around it a little bit. But like I said, I think those, at least for the first year, these are the basics you need to follow. Because a snapshot of 1 month or 1 week, pointless. You're looking for trends over time. Is the time that they're spending on their site static? Because there's no such thing as an industry-wide benchmark. Each one of you has a unique set of supporters with unique online behaviors. For one parent center, 1 minute and 50 seconds, if it's consistent, that might be a great time on site. For somebody else, 5 minutes and 20 seconds, that might be great for them. But to compare you to each other, that's not really valuable. It's much better to compare to yourself. So Joyce.
You mentioned calendars in advance a couple of times as not being so important, but it's always one of our top 5 because
Excellent.
you can go right in and register for the training right on the website.
Excellent.
And sign up, so that's
Good.
visited frequently.
Great. And I think that that's true, especially for you all who do a lot of trainings and have calendars. However, I've seen some parent centers where I go to the calendar and I click, and it's this pop-up comes up in Google Calendar, so it totally takes me away from their website and in this place that looks nothing like their website, so I'm not sure if I've just got scammed or something. And then when I click on the event, up comes this little pop-up that says, email us. Now, if you have a way that I can register right on site, awesome. And if I can click right on the event, and like I said, I would love it, and I don't know if this is on yours, but on 1 or 2 I've seen, I can sort the events by, like I said, keyword or teacher or date or anything I want to sort it by, as long as it makes it so much more friendly to me. But you're right. I think for you all, events and calendars are probably some of your most visited sites. But I'm so glad you know that. Because there are probably a lot of work to keep up and maintain and update and things like that. But for you all, I think it's probably normally worth it. So look for trends over time by quarter. Yeah, Phil.
I understand you might not be able to answer this because there's too many variables involved, and it might depend on the purpose of your website and your organization, etc. But is there sort of a target and how much traffic you get? Is there sort of a target range for repeat visitors?
No, but I will say, it's not on here, but in Google Analytics, it will give you a percentage of new and returning visitors. And if you've just revised your website or you're kind of have a new website, a lot of new visitors, that's normal. But over time, you really want the majority to be returning visitors. You're right. It would be wrong for me to say, yes, and you want 75% returning and 25% new. No, but I would say I would like you to see you have a majority of the majority be returning visitors. That's why I don't want anyone on their website to have it say, welcome to our website. Because that's, and somebody here might have that because I've seen that on quite a few centers' websites. That's for the first-time visitor. And once I've been there once, I'm not a first-time visitor anymore. And then I'm like, and especially when somebody said, we don't have, or Yvette said, we seem kind of static. If it's what it says every time, then you're not speaking to me, the return visitor. So good point. But you're right. It's much better for you to look and see, is it trending in the majority, or is it trending toward the majority if I'm not there yet? As long as I'm on the right path. Progress, not perfection, I guess would be the thing for that. This is from Constant Contact. So now to talk about email, and these are the only things you really need to know. It lists, these programs list, this is the date it was sent, the name of the email, how many were sent, how many bounced, which means they didn't get there. And people's email addresses don't get better, they get worse. People change email addresses over time. So someone, this is a great job for a volunteer by the way, goes into your database and says, we don't have the email address for this person. Can we send them a card or call them and say, hey, we don't have the right email address for you anymore. Would you like to get it? Maybe not. That's fine. But at least we're following up. Don't just let these bounced emails just be like, oh, well, I guess we won't follow them anymore. I know an organization that did that to somebody who'd given them $10,000 and nobody just didn't bother to check. And so they were like, why are you talking to me 2 years later? You haven't talked to me for 2 years after I gave you $10,000. So it's really important to keep on top of your data. This may seem administrative, but one mistake like that can cost you. What percentage were opened and how many people clicked? And again, there is no industry-wide benchmark. This particular organization, they were averaging about 23%, 25% of people opening their emails. They had a long history of terrible emails that were long and text. So for them, that's a good percentage. Yeah, Kathy.
Aside from sending long, boring emails, a lot of people that I know, particularly professionals, who are sometimes a link to families for us, get horrendous amounts of email
Truly.
every day. And so they've developed this wonderful technique for dealing with that called delete. Have you come across strategies in terms of the whole email campaign thing that really work in that kind of environment?
Okay, so are there strategies, because so many people, especially the professionals you all are connected with, deal with email glut and email overload. And so you're right. And so one thing is that, a lot of those emails, again, they're very text-based, and how valuable are they? And so I would love it if you went to those professionals, brought them in for, pizza or coffee or something, and said, we'd like to revise and make our emails much more valuable to you. Or maybe you even send them an online survey, something to say, what do you users want from our emails? What don't you like about our emails? Why do you delete them? What is it about and look for the bright spots. What is it about the emails of ours that you don't delete? What is different about that? And how can we provide more value to you in those emails? And is that your preferred communication method? Because for some people it's like, no, I'd rather you post that somewhere else because that's where I go. For some people that's maybe Facebook or Twitter or someplace else. I would also say that subject line is so very important. I showed the example last time of that micro table of contents, and for you to say, weekly update from the parent center, delete. It's not giving me any information. How can you make that subject line give me some information? IEP success stories. That I might click on if I'm dealing with that subject. So great question. But yeah, there is a total glut of email and people are overwhelmed. That's why it's really important for you to build your email list well. And people are going to unsubscribe, and so that's fine. There's going to be that kind of churn. So great. So I think these are the things, again, you should look at over time: open and click-through rate, the response rate, and how many people subscribe and unsubscribe. Facebook has something called insights. So when you're looking at Facebook, now that once you have a page, I think you have to have 30 people like your page before it'll activate insights. But if you go to the admin page, I skipped ahead. If you go to the admin page on Insights, and then usually what it does is it sends you this update on a weekly basis. And we'll look at that more in a minute. There is this nonprofit benchmark report. So if you're dying to know what the benchmarks are across, other people, it's for email and fundraising, for text messaging and social media. As I've said, these are TBU, true but useless, I think. Your own metrics are much more important. It's interesting to compare, but there's no industry-wide benchmark. So don't go on here and say, oh my God, the usual open rate for email is 40% and mine's only 10%. So, let's work on that 10%. Let's not, say, oh, well, we're not going to get to 40. So, if you are the admin of your Facebook page, on the right-hand side it will say View Insights. You click on there, and there's two pieces to Insights. There's the page overview. The two pieces are users and interactions. So this is the kind of first thing you see, and you can look at it by week or by month. and it'll tell you how many active users you have, how many users I think it's by week and then by month. Excuse me. And then your posts, how many people have liked or commented on them. And, I don't think, the user's information is somewhat interesting because it gives you some demographics. Because it's important for you to know, are most of my, the people that follow me on Facebook, are they mostly male or female? What age category do they fall into? I think that's interesting. Can you really act on that? I'm not sure. So I think it's interesting to track once in a while to help with a demographic idea. But I think interactions is much more important, because that tells you how many people liked and commented on the things that you posted. And what's nice about it is that you can click on these column headers and you can see which one had the most impressions. It will sort these high to low. And so the most impressions, how many people looked at it or passed it on and looked at it, and then feedback, how many people commented on it. And so, this is from one of my clients, 1.8% feedback. Well, in that month, that was the best that they got. And so don't feel like, oh, gee, that's only 1%. Great, that's some feedback. That's some people interacting with your content. Okay, so again, what I advocate, especially small organizations do, is create like something in Excel or Word. Once a month, you go on here, you grab what the top 3 are in feedback and impressions and put it on there. Once a quarter, you pull those documents out that have your website analytics, your email analytics, and your Facebook analytics, and you're like, okay, let's sit down and talk about this for half an hour. And what does this mean? Which one of our posts did a lot of people comment on? Which one of our posts did a lot of people like? Which one of our stories in our email did people click on? Which one of our stories on our website did people click on? Great. Let's tell the staff about that so that they create more stories like that and they are informed. So many organizations ask staff for content and then they never tell them if the content worked or not. It can really go a long way toward motivating people to help write, especially when you start getting the competitive juices going. It's like, your story was #1 last month, and your story was the #1 the month before, and your story was the #1 in email. Oh, really? Well, how come? What was mine? Mine was #2. Well, mine was #3. Yeah. Believe me, psychologically, it has a wonderful kind of effect sometimes. YouTube is very important. YouTube, if you don't know, is the second largest search engine after Google. If you're not on YouTube, I strongly encourage you to get on YouTube. It's free. Other parent centers are on there. I know Pluck has posted things. I know other parent centers have. Go on there and just create a channel. Because if I type in Children Disabilities Arizona and you don't have a YouTube page, you're not going to come up. And I think you probably have a good amount of website visitors, but I'm thinking you don't have the 5 million people that visit YouTube every day. And you could take advantage of that. Some of them may be potential donors or volunteers or need your services. So you can go onto YouTube, you sign in as the admin, you look under My Videos, and it'll give you this summary of this is how many views what were the most popular, and these nice graphs. Again, this map of the world telling you where people came from, that's true but useless. I don't really care that people came and viewed my video from Russia. It doesn't help me any. And I have several nonprofits that have been very successful on YouTube. They have like over 25,000 views in their video, and so now they're eligible for revenue sharing through ads. What they tell me is 90% of the comments on YouTube are not really even worth your time. So just be aware that you don't really have to spend a lot of time monitoring comments. You might get a couple comments from big supporters or parents or something like that, so you should be listening so you can respond, but just understand that they're like, a lot of people seem to have a lot of time on their hands and drinks in their hand, if you know what I mean, and just, that's all they have to do is watch these videos and make ridiculous comments. So, all right. Another thing that's good to track is links. If you've ever gotten an email with a long web address that was wrapped around and broken and you clicked and it wouldn't work, this is a tool that's meant to help with that. And it's also very useful on Twitter where you only have 140 characters, and they're called URL shorteners. And here are two, and I've used them both, Kligs and Bitly. Bitly is really actually quite popular, and what's nice about it is when I go to write up something on Twitter or even on Facebook, rather than putting in this long website address, I can just copy the website address, feed it in here, and it gives me this nice short 12-character one, which is very useful both for email and for Twitter, because again, an email can get wrapped. Free, yeah.
It's just click dot something or click?
I think it's cli.gs, and it's bit.ly, but if you Google either Bitly or Kligs, it'll come up. And so then what I can do is I can take that and I can post it on Twitter, on Facebook, in my blog, and via my e-newsletter. And then a week later, I can come back here and click and get a graph and a printout about this is how many people clicked on that link across all of your different channels. So it gives me this nice impression of how successful was that. So especially like Julie was saying, if I on a regular basis am sharing resources from other parent centers or other places, other websites I follow, great. Then I can go on here and say, all right, across all those 12 different resources that I shared in the last 2 months, which ones were most popular across all channels? Okay. All right. So again, that was my fire hose of information about social media and tracking. I see some of you with your hair standing backwards from the flow. So I wanted to give you a moment to reflect and think about, what could you be tracking? Because as you can understand, so often people come to me asking me the wrong question, which is, what should we be doing on Facebook? And I'd say to Sandra, well, Sandra, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get more parents to come to you, or no, you have enough parents, you just want to increase their level of ability to advocate for their kids and their knowledge and skills? What are you trying to do? And then how can Facebook and Twitter and social media and these other things help you do that? How many of you have too many donors? Aren't you looking for donors that could help you do stuff? So attracting donors, great, I get it. Please stop donating to us, please. We're overwhelmed. Rachel.
Just really quickly, sorry, but you mentioned about the time window on Insights. Actually
yep.
Look at what your user. I know it says we were
Great.
popular with this, but is there a way to go back and see X amount of followers start from 7 to 8:30 or 8:30 to?
No, I don't think it'll go granular to time. Yeah, and I think people talk to me about that all the time, about what time of day should I send out my email? It's like during daylight. That doesn't, people have spent a lot of time and energy and come up with pretty much bupkis about this is what's effective. Tuesdays and Thursdays seem like good days because people are busy on Friday and they don't really pay attention. I'm busy on Monday and don't pay attention on Friday. But again, you've got to try it. You're like, great, let me send out this email, at slightly different times and see if it affects it. My experience is it hardly ever affects it. You brought up a good point. One thing I do want to mention about Facebook Insights, it seems to right now only go back 1 month. So that's why on a monthly or weekly basis, you should go on there, grab that information and put it in Excel or Word so that you have it, because you can't go back and look at 6 months or a year. And Twitter, by the way, was supposed to come out with something like that. Right now, they only provide it for people who pay to advertise and be featured on Twitter. I'm hoping they're going to come out with it. But that's, again, what's nice about a tool like Hootsuite or something like that. That will help do some of that tracking. Good, but again, it's thinking about, what are you trying to do and how can this help you either spread the word or engage new folks? Because I'm not trying to pretend social media is a great fundraising tool. I think, the latest data I saw is like 1 or 2% of the total fundraising comes in through social media. Some people have had great success on here, don't get me wrong. I was teaching a group of community organizing grantees from a foundation recently. And this one organization, which is 2 people, I had told them about Facebook causes and he didn't know about it. He told some of his activists about it. Within 2 weeks, he came back to a second training and was like, one of my activists did a cause and raised $1,800 for us in 2 weeks. And I had never even known about it until you told me about it. So, sometimes that can be really useful just to help spread the word and tell people, because I don't know if you know this about causes, and I don't want to get focused too much on Facebook, but each one of you, let's say everybody here was, from Peak, each one of them could start their own cause to support Peak. And then Peak could then link to that. So that JC would be talking to her friends and networks about, I'm doing this little cause to support this organization, Peak. Help me out, and everyone would do it. And then they could link to it, so all the donations would come through them. So again, that gets back to those free agent activists who's out there and who might have the time and the inclination to do this, and who might be willing to go out and say to their networks, hey, You all know that, we had a baby 5 years ago and it got diagnosed with X disability, and now I'm dealing with this, and so now, the best help in this whole, challenging circumstance has been this parent center. Now I'd like to give back, so I'm asking all of you to help them. That can be really powerful and get real results. So Terry, yeah.
Can't speak for finance science, but through the job I have that pays me.
And what job is that?
I work as a community work incentives coordinator under the WIPA program in North Dakota.
Oh, great. Okay.
And I have a blog, work-related blog, that I try to keep information resources on it. But there's one thing I did that really helped kind of drive traffic was through Google AdWords, you can check to see when I do my headline for that blog post, I search it in there and see if it is a top search phrase, and it gives you suggestions.
Yeah. Google AdWords.
And then when I post, let's say, release forms or PDFs of certain different benefits related type things, quick reference guides, I use Scribe, and that's super duper handy to
Excellent.
the post.
Well, I think that the Region 5 RP-TAC should tap you to do a webinar for the parent centers just to tell them about those two experiences, because I think everybody could benefit. And how many of you knew what he was talking about? Great, not the majority. So, and I mean, I know what you're talking about, but still, I think for you to, I think it's so helpful for other parent centers to be able for you to show them this concrete example about this is how I go. This is AdWords. This is how I go to AdWords. This is how I check the thing, and this is how I might modify it. So, I don't know if you're willing to share that because that's really good information. And it's really cool that you're doing that. But
And analytics, I know, especially rurally, struggle on reporting. All that stuff. Well, for my job, I always add my Google Analytics to my reporting, which looks better than, I spent all day, one day traveling to meet one client, you know what I mean? So,
right. Yeah.
If I get 5 hits in a day and that's averaged over the quarter, that helps me a lot.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, what I've seen happen to organizations when they weren't doing this in the past is once they are doing this monthly, they're collecting this data every month about their analytics. Every quarter, that goes to the board. And to the board, they say, oh, this quarter, this is how many people liked us on Facebook. This is our #1 post on Facebook. This is the thing that got retweeted the most. And these are our 3 most popular pages. And these are the stories that people really responded to. Or this is how many people donated online. Just a little bit so that they give an insight, that they understand, oh, okay, so that when you come to ask them for funds to redesign the website that's really static or hard to use, they get, oh, well, this is why. That this actually results in donations and it can save admin stuff. So, all right, so just to kind of wrap up this piece of content, and then I'd love to just have a conversation and talk about things that this has sparked for you, but that this is really the goal. This kind of coordinated approach, that I can touch your organization in whichever way works for me. I mean, I mentioned before about text campaigns for people who are lower income, might not have broadband. Is text on your radar? I mean, for most of you, like you said, Jerry said that, you're just going to start to get onto Facebook and Twitter. So great, I think that's a great step, and that, text may be down the line. But, might you start collecting people's mobile phone numbers and asking them if they accept text messages as a baby step? Then, in a couple months, once you have this critical mass of, oh wow, okay, now we have 50 people who said they would prefer to hear from us by text and they have cell phones, what are we going to tell them? Maybe it's just about the trainings. Maybe that's our primary thing. And so, every week or something, we're going to say, next week there's a training on this at this time, and either a phone number or a website link. How might we best use it? And how might we ask people, what makes sense for you? Because there's also a lot of people that are talking about doing apps for mobile phones when it's much smarter for you to do a mobile version of your website that people can access on those phones rather than spending all the money on this app. There's enough apps out there, and I'm not sure that it makes sense for individual nonprofits to do those. But it does make sense for me, if I go and visit your website on my mobile device, to have a nice, clean, shrunk down version where I can register for an event, read basics about services, maybe fill out a form to get contacted. But what are the essentials? What are the most popular things, or what makes sense, what people want to do? So that wherever I touch you on email, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, or on my mobile device, I can stay connected with you, and I can choose the method. Because, there's a lot of people who aren't on Twitter and are never going to be on Twitter, and you may count yourself among them. That's great. It's up to different people's personal, things. So as long as you have something there, and you understand you don't have to create content for all these different channels. There's this repurposing and connection of content. JC made the point of things disappear on Facebook, so don't feel bad about kind of repurposing it. But also, when a new article goes up on our website, I might blog about a specific piece of it, and then I might also just take that headline and post it on Facebook and Twitter. And then I'm good for a week or two. So don't feel like, oh my God, I have to create content for all these different channels. No, create one piece of great content and share pieces or quotes from it in other places and drive traffic to it. And allow people to have a conversation and make comments, so it's not just a dead end. I didn't talk about this at websites, but there's something on the website we call a content dead end, where I read a story and then that's it. Every page of your website, and this is a tip I should have given last time, but I'll give you now, is for further reading. If you liked this story, which had to do with parents, I don't have the words, skills for parents advocating for their kids, great. Are there other articles on your website about that same topic? Or other resources for educators, or others for professionals who are links to parents. So to try and never have a content dead end on your website, where a story just ends and I have to go back to the navigation. Always suggest other things for me to go to. So. All right, so I just wanted to review some of the things that we talked about. That it's the working together across email and your website and social media and integrating them. And so I see the same message across different channels. To engage the audience, ask your audience, what do they want and where are they? Before you do this. So Sherry, I don't know if you've done this, but do you even know how much of your audience is on either Facebook or Twitter? That's fine. Most people don't, so no worries. But that I think
we just hired a company to come in and set it up for us. Just like last week.
Oh wow! Hired a company to come and set up Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, well, they're gonna
set up your pages.
They're gonna rework our website.
Oh.
Set up our pages.
Oh, great.
So that and then they're gonna come in and train us to use it.
Awesome. And then they're going to teach you to fish. They're not going to fish for great. Awesome. Good. I was like, they're going to do Facebook for you. Oh no. Great. That's a great thing. So I really hope that they include.
Do all our tracking for us and send us monthly tracking statements.
Good. So if they haven't included in their scope of work, I would go back to them and say, I just learned and realized we don't have the users in this equation. You're helping us build a website, you're helping us build Facebook, and you're not even mentioning talking to any of our users. So who are we building this for? And so isn't it our users? So yeah, I'd strongly recommend, and again, it's not like you have to find out, within a week and have a definite number. No, but create this process where over the next 6 months, every training you have, you're like, in your survey or your, evaluation or something, are you on Facebook, are you on Twitter? Something for you to do. Yeah, so because you may find out that 80% are on Facebook and nobody's on Twitter, so then you're like, shwoo, I don't have to be on Twitter. I might think about it next year, but for now, let me go where my people are. So I recommend that you all start there and find out, well, gee, are my people even there? Because like I said, you may find the opposite. You may be like, almost no one's on Facebook, all these people are on Twitter or something like that. So Kathy and then JC?
Well, I'm just thinking as I listen to the talk that really finding out who our audience is going to be a multi-layer effort. If we just get analytics for our webpage, but our webpage isn't that great, then we're getting information about an audience that isn't that filled with our webpage. So that's good.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but that's not
Right.
the only piece of information. That doesn't tell us where they are.
Right.
It just tells us that, we had a problem which we already knew.
Yeah, because if you've had a bad website for a couple of years and people are used to not going to it, because I had an organization who was like, oh, we have all this great data on our website, and it's like, but your staff are the only ones that visit it. When we looked at the IP addresses.
We have to look at some analytics, but we might also have to do some other ways of determining who our audience is.
Yeah, like I said, if you're able to, I mean, I know it's challenging because people have limited time when you bring them in for trainings and things like that. But again, can you buy a pizza and invite folks to come in? Can you do something online? Could you, or like you said, there are multiple ways to have a continuous feedback loop, because you're right, this isn't a single picture in time because your audience keeps changing, and so and so to once a quarter or twice a year to be able to say, okay, this is our twice a year 2-question thing. All right, how often do you visit Facebook? Are you on Facebook and how often? Are you on Twitter and how often, or something like that? To do it in pieces. But yeah, you're right. So many of you do a lot of one-on-one, and there's just if you can add a field to your database, so when you're on the phone with somebody, you can be like, can I ask you 2 questions to help us with communications? Have you visited our website in the last 6 months? Are you on Facebook or are you on Twitter? Thanks. Yeah, JC.
I was more of a comment, just kind of from what she had said about having someone do reports. And I just wanted to make sure that, I don't know, you might have said this and I missed it, but just that Google Analytics is it's free, so that you can do all of that yourself and get all that information and print out your own reports.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we didn't get into specifics of what Sherry was talking about, but as long as Sherry is going and she's getting the Google Analytics up and running with her own, not her own email address, but actually what's best actually is a generic email address. So like peak or pluck@gmail. You should use that to sign up and not one person's email address, so that they don't, like, if they leave, so does access to analytics. But you're right. Sherry would, in theory, set up that Google account and get the piece of code. She may then turn to this vendor and say, here, put this piece of code on every page of my website because I don't know HTML, and test it and prove to me that it's working. But you're right. From then on, that's why I said, are they going to teach you to fish? So I was glad that they were. But you're right, because it'd be ridiculous to pay anyone to spend 5 minutes going onto Google Analytics, pulling out those 5 pieces of data and throwing them into an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, sometimes people pay me to go through that process once so I can show them, okay, this is the specific information I dug out, and now let's talk about how do we interpret that.
Right, exactly.
Because that's, I think, where I'm more helpful. But you're right, and sometimes it's really obvious, and sometimes it's not so. So it's much more maybe getting some advising on strategy. What is your data telling you? Yeah, good. Let's see. So yeah, and just how important that tracking activity is, and then responding to that data about, well, what is this telling me? And also, like I said, try new things. It doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be like, this amazing, groundbreaking activity that you've done. Like I gave the example in the other place. It's like a parent came in, I connected with them some resources, she hugged me and left. That's great. She hugged you, she had a smile, you helped her. You helped somebody. And that gives me a window into what you do, and that kind of warm fuzzy that's great for engagement. But also, like, asking folks, what are you having for dinner on Sunday? Everything doesn't have to be about the disability. It doesn't have to be about the IEP. It doesn't have to be about all those things, It's so encourage people to kind of, draw outside the lines and say, okay, what are you doing for July 4th? Because everybody, at least most of the people you work for, they're families with kids. So what do families with kids do? They do stuff on holidays and weekends, and might that be a nice break for them to not always be thinking about, the IEP struggle and the disability and stuff, and just, what are we doing? And then it's like, oh yeah, I'm a human, I'm a full human being too. I'm not just this thing in this category. And likewise, that you all are as well. And your staff has, a variety of interests and skills and knowledge. So, great. Good. So, let's see. Yes, thank you, Phil.
Are you familiar with web trends?
I am familiar with the web trends, yeah.
Thoughts about them as a metric? System?
Yeah, Did you have some reason you really especially like them or anything, or?
No, I'm
Oh, okay.
been using them for 13 years, so I'm curious to know what you think.
Okay, gotcha. So I haven't had a lot of experience with the tool. What I've heard anecdotally, and so I haven't tested this tool recently, is that it just doesn't have the depth that Google Analytics has. That it's evolved some in the last 13 years, but that, I mean, they spent, something like $1 billion 3 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago now, to build this, and so it's much more up to date and captures things more dynamically. But I have never seen them kind of compared side to side, so I'd be remiss if I said something about that. But because I was working with a human services agency in Florida, and they had a guy that just loves analytics, and so he downloaded the Google Analytics and went home and spread them all over the floor and went through them all. But what he discovered was a lot of people were really interested in one of their residential programs, and that led him down it led to them creating a special micro site just about their residential programs because it was so popular. But he really had to kind of dig through and see this group of pages that weren't necessarily under the same heading or in the same place are all very popular, and they all have to do with the single program. And it's something, just like with your trainings, that a lot of people can engage with online in terms of they can kind of register for them or do these quizzes to find out, am I right for this? Because again, when I've looked at some of these parent center websites and I look through the list of trainings, I wouldn't even know, as if I was new to this as a new parent, I wouldn't know where to begin. There was no 101, 201, 301. And there was nowhere for me to click and say, is this class right for me? Answer these 3 questions. Have you done an IEP?
Write that down.
That sounds like a good idea. Right, because oftentimes as somebody who does a lot of trainings, I know that people will come and be like, this training wasn't what I expected. I have this, one training was called the Executive Director's Guide to Social Media, and these people were like, well, I'm program staff, and this wasn't directed at me. It's like, well, did you read the title? So, so that's not always going to work. But yeah, I would think it would be great as a parent if you had this 3-question thing about, is this class right for me? And like I said, testimonials or what other parents have said about this class that was really helpful. But to be able to help frame it about not only this is what you're going to come out of this class with, but this is what you should have kind of going into it. Cool. All right. So I think it was basically like trying new things. So what I wanted to do is, like I said, just kind of open it up and have this kind of technology and social media free-for-all. Although I think we're about, I'm supposed to stop? Yeah.
We can take a few minutes for questions though, or?
Great. So if there's any of these things that either pop up or that I've mentioned or that you're struggling with, but like I said, it can just be baby steps. If you're not into this social media or you haven't done it yet, a listening project for the next couple months is a great way to start. Find other parent centers, find other people that are interesting or that you've heard that either work on this issue or similar issues that you're passionate about, and see what are the things that they post that I comment about. Who sends me emails that I open? To Kathy's point, what emails do I delete and do I open, and what is there about that? Is it about the subject line or about the writer or the fact that they're short and sweet? When I get an email from a nonprofit and I know it's no more than 2 lines and it tells me what the main point is, that's worth my 2 seconds. But when I know it's going to drone on and on about everything, all this background material that I don't need and not going to get to the point, that's not as engaging for me. So. Excellent. Well, I'm happy to hang around for a little while, and again, I just want to thank you all for spending your time. I hope it was helpful, and I wish you the best with your social media stuff. So thank you.